Welcome to this video where we will talk about how to complete exercise 3 add count. Here's the model answer for this exercise. First, we're going to complete this set of calculations here. Basically, we're going to look at the bookings that were given to you in exercise 2 hotel data, and based on that data, we're going to count how many bookings there were for each room type, how many room nights there were for each room type, and we're also going to calculate what share of the total bookings and total room nights came from each room type. So let's get started. Here's a model answer for your reference, and here is the worksheet that we're going to complete. So let's take a look at total bookings for a standard twin room, which is the first calculation we need to make. We're going to use a function called COUNTIF, and what we will do is count how many times the room type standard twin room appears in this range, which I've highlighted. The range starts from C5 and goes all the way to C95. So I type here equal COUNTIF the first argument is the range that contains the cells we want to count. And as I said previously, it can be found on another worksheet. Because it's in another worksheet, we need to include the sheet name in the reference. We can either type the sheet name ourselves, or if you want to do it more quickly, you would just use the mouse. So right now, the cursor is blinking here. It's waiting for me to enter the range. So anything that I click on will be filled in here. So I use my mouse to click on this sheet to switch over there. Now note that when I clicked on the sheet name, it's been filled in up here already, followed by exclamation point, because you need exclamation point to separate the sheet name from the range reference. And then I use my mouse and I click the range C5 and I scroll down to C95. So it fills that in for me as well. So this is our first argument. We want to count the cells within this range which meet our criteria. So our second argument is the criteria. And the criteria is that it should be equal to standard twin room. So since I'm finished with this first argument, I want to go back to my cell here, which is where I was adding it. And you'll note that since I switched to a new worksheet again, that sheet name has been filled in here. But we don't really need the sheet name here because this is the same sheet. So I can just remove that. So again, we want to count how many cells in this range contain a value equal to standard twin room. We could do something like this. We could do something like this, and we could press enter, and you'll see that the answer is 24. So there are 24 bookings where the value in C5 to C95 is equal to standard twin room. But if we did it this way, we wouldn't be able to copy this formula to the other rows because the criteria would always be equal to standard twin room. So we can rewrite this so that we use a cell reference instead. So instead of hard coding or typing in the values equal to standard twin room, I can just click on A5 and that would be my criteria. And one more thing we need to do is we need to make C5 and C95 an absolute reference, which means we need to put a $sign in front of C and in front of 5, in front of C and in front of 95. So I'm going to go ahead and press F4, and that will type in the $signs for me automatically. So the answer is still 24, but now it's in a format that I can just simply copy downwards. And then I can calculate the sum. I can go to home and just press auto sum here. Okay, check that the argument to the sum function is correct, and I press enter. So this is the total number of bookings. Now for the share of bookings from each room type, we simply calculate using this formula, the number of bookings for that room type divided by the total bookings. So the share of bookings from standard twin room is 26.4%. Now in case you're wondering how to show this value, let me go up here. I'll go back to general, that means no specific format. So this is the original format, and of course this is not easy to read, and we want to convert it to percentage. So a quick way to convert a number to its percentage is over here under home. Here's a group called number. You can simply click this %, which is a shortcut style. However, I want to increase the precision because right now it's not showing any decimal places. So one of these buttons will increase the decimal. This is the one I want. So I press once to add 1 decimal place. I press another time for 2 decimal places. Okay, so I can keep increasing the precision this way, but I just want 1 decimal place. So I'm going to decrease decimal back to 1 decimal place. Now, before I can copy this formula to the rest of the rows, if I were to copy it as it is now, you'll see that I'll get division by 0 errors. So I'll undo that. Okay, so why am I getting a division by 0 error? Because B11 needs to be an absolute reference. Okay, it always has to refer to B11, even if I copy this formula to the other rows. Now I can copy it downward, and I can sum the percentages just to make sure it's equal to 100%. Now let's calculate the total room nights booked for each room type. Let's start with total room nights for standard twin room here in D5. We're going to use a function called SUMIF. And the way SUMIF works is it takes 3 arguments. The first argument is the range to which we want to apply a criteria. So as we saw earlier with COUNTIF, the range is C5 to C95 on the Ex3 hotel data sheet, because this is the range that contains the room types. And we need another range, which is the range that we want to add. And that range contains the room nights for each booking. That will be I5 to I95 on this Ex3 hotel data sheet. So basically what we're saying is that check the room type in column C, starting from C5. If it's equal to the room type that I want, then include the room nights in the sum. And then go on to the next one. And so on, and so on, and so on. So as we go down this range, we evaluate first if it meets our criteria. If it meets our criteria, then we include the room night for that row in our sum. So now that we understand how SUMIF works, let's use it to calculate the room nights for standard twin room. So the first argument is the range that contains the values to which we want to apply our criteria. And again, I'm going to use the mouse to click on the sheet and the range where my evaluation range is, so that I don't need to type it here. So I click Ex3 hotel data. It fills in the sheet name here. I select the range that I want to evaluate. Okay, that's my first argument. I type comma up here. I switch back to Ex3-AddCount. I get rid of this sheet name because it's not necessary. Okay, so my criteria again is for it to be equal to the value in A5. And again, I remove the sheet name to make it easier to read. Okay, so those are my first 2 arguments, and it's actually very similar to the arguments of COUNTIF. But for SUMIF, we need a third argument, which is the range that contains the values that we would like to add, and that will be the room nights range. So I go back to the EX2 hotel data, and since I switched back to EX2 hotel data, the sheet name is again filled in here, and I select I5 to I95. I type the closing parenthesis and I press enter, and the answer I get is 206 room nights booked for standard twin room. Before I copy this formula, I need to make this an absolute reference. A5 can remain as a relative reference. I5 to I95 also must be an absolute reference. I can then copy this to the rest of the rows, and I can sum it. So there's a total of 742 room nights booked. And again, we use the division operator to calculate the share or the percent of room nights from each room type. Okay, so 27.8% of room nights was booked for standard twin room, and again I have to change D11 into an absolute reference before I copy this to the rest of the rows. And that is the first part of EX3 add count.